When we got here and we put hydrophones in the water, we realized how special this place actually is.
This whole area is just one big bowl of whale food.
The tankers on the coast, they'll be coming. What can you do?
That's just a glimpse of the documentary, The Whale and the Raven. The National Film Board teamed up with a German director who had a strong affinity for our coast. And it tells the story of researchers on Gill Island in northern BC. It's going to be shown at the VanCity Theatre until January 16th, and we're very happy that Andrew Williamson was able to join us today. He is one of the producers. Hello and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We just saw some amazing images there. The whales, the coastline, the nature. Just tell us a little bit more about Gill Island in particular.
Beautiful part of the world that I had not been to, even though I grew up in BC, and it was our director, Miriam Lloydse, who had a connection there through her husband's best friend, Herman, who's one of the two whale researchers that we profile in the film. So Gill Island is off of Hartley Bay, which is at the end of the Douglas Channel, and Gitga'at is at the head of the Douglas Channel. So we spent most of our time filming in that area, a little bit up into Prince Rupert, but mostly in and around the Douglas Channel.
Okay, so just give us a better idea of how we are introduced to the whales through the researchers.
There's two whale researchers working on Gill and Finn Island, Herman and Janie, and they were the center, they were really the heart of the film and what got us interested in the story initially. They're doing some pretty groundbreaking whale research in this incredible part of the world. So that's our entry to the area. It also forms our introduction to the Gitga'at Nation, whose territory they work in and have permission to do their research in. And that was our introduction to the whales and what's happening in the ecosystem up there.
What kind of research comes to light?
They are doing a lot of stuff around whale song, around whale habitat and population numbers. They're seeing an increase in the whales that are in the area. They are seeing some really interesting developments in the research about whale song and how it develops season over season and how the songs are built and shared with different parts of whale or different groups of whales from different parts of the world. So it's pretty amazing work.
It's amazing just to hear that language, isn't it? It's magical. It absolutely. And what about your personal experience in being involved with the shoot? What was that like?
It was incredible. I think the first thing that caught my imagination, and one of the first things I remember seeing on Gill, is that Herman and Janie had erected speakers in the trees on the island that were amplifying the sounds of the whales under the water. So you could stand on land and hear what was happening underneath the waves. And that was an experience I've never had before.
Wow. You mentioned the Gitga'at Nation. Tell me more about sort of the kinds of conversations you or the researchers had with them to, I guess, to get the buy-in.
It was very similar to what Herman and Janie had done to get permission to work in that territory, and a lot of the research that they're doing goes to the Gitga'at to use for their lobbying and work with the LNG industries and trying to protect their territory. And so we took a similar approach, which we approached the Gitga'at and said, we're not here to tell an Indigenous story, but we are filming in your territory. So can we negotiate a filming protocol that tables what we would need in terms of access to film and delivers what you would need to let us be in the territory? I'd produced a series for Knowledge Network called Emergency Room, and I used a very similar template that we used with Vancouver General Hospital, which is, okay, let's make this work for both parties. So we were able to provide some training opportunities up in Hartley Bay. We had a couple of roles on the film that we could hire people from Hartley Bay to participate. And so it was a very positive working relationship, I believe, for both parties back and forth, because we were in the territory for almost a year.
So it's interesting that it isn't just wildlife and nature as we would normally see it. You bring in some animation as well and other kinds of techniques. So why did you decide to do that?
Well, we knew early on that we weren't telling an Indigenous story. We didn't have an Indigenous director. However, we were playing with big themes that are really relevant in this country, and we wanted to bring a senior story consultant in who could advise us on that storytelling and the way that we were presenting the Gitga'at and the territory. So we approached Roy Henry Vickers, who's a famous artist, and he has a connection to Herman and Janie. He'd been to Gill Island. He's not from Gitga'at territory, but he's close. He lives close by, and so he was a great fit. He jumped on board, and that conversation creatively evolved into him using some of his animation in the film, which an animator from Vancouver was able to animate, and we set to some music, and it's a really beautiful piece of the film that we're really proud of.
Well, it's interesting that all of these pieces just came together for this. And you mentioned, the LNG industry, the whales. Is there a place or is there a mission in this particular project where the two can coexist?
That's a good question. What drew me also to the project was the director wanting to take a 360-degree look at the area as they could. So we talked to the mayor of Kitimat, for example, who's understandably excited about what LNG means for jobs in the area. I got to experience firsthand how economically devastated the region is in terms of finding jobs for people. So it is a complicated issue I think we're all facing. I think the film does a very good job of asking the question, are whales sentient beings? And depending on how you answer that question, would you make decisions differently about tanker traffic or access to some of those fjords and channels? So it doesn't claim to prescribe an outcome, but I think it raises some really interesting questions.
So it's about to go on a big film circuit. It's here until mid-January. What kind of traction are you hoping it's going to get?
We've had some really successful festival screenings. We had over 12,000 people see the film in Germany. And I hope it continues to have the kind of reception it's had, which is it causes people to have really interesting conversations, for people to re-examine some of the decisions they're making. And I think it really celebrates a part of the world that's very beautiful and very sacred and very fragile.
Well, all the best with it. We'll enjoy the run here in Vancouver. And thanks very much for giving us this preview.
Thanks for having me today. It's fantastic.